Hello, folks. This channel has always been dedicated to fighting for empowerment, equality, and justice for the autism community and the disabled community as a whole. In order for a civilized society to be just, it must fight for the marginalized and the oppressed. And the moral fiber of any society should always be judged based on how they treat their most vulnerable. About a year ago, I made a video about police brutality against autistics. And in that video, I cited a statistic that 50% of all instances of police brutality occur against the disabled community. And this video got met relatively positively. The conclusion seemed obvious. And it's pretty obvious that the reason why it seems so uncontroversial to say that police officers should not beat the disabled community is because it's a universal idea. People with disabilities can be any color. It might seem like I usually don't get too political on this channel. And it probably seems that way because when I do talk about politics, I'm talking about disability rights and autism rights. But those are political issues. They're affected by policy. They're affected by culture. And they're discussions of marginalization. So with that in mind, it doesn't feel right to do one of my regular videos this week. I feel like we need to discuss what is happening in the United States right now. Protests and riots have erupted throughout the nation in response to the murder of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer. And this is a narrative that has become all too common for the Black community. Black people make up 13% of the nation, and yet they make up almost a quarter of all instances of police killings. And 99% of police officers who kill somebody on the job don't end up getting prosecuted or convicted. And on top of that, 17% of Black people who were killed by police officers were unarmed, compared to 12% of white people. Now, I know that a lot of people come to this channel because they seek equality for autism and disability, but you cannot demand that equality and that justice and then turn around and deny it to other people. So while I don't endorse violence as a form of protest, I stand in solidarity with those protesting a system of institutionalized racism. And I'm far more outraged by police officers who break the law that they swear to uphold than I am by any rioter. We cannot hold police officers to a lower standard, or even the same standard. They must be held to the highest possible standard. Because we have signed a social contract with law enforcement to protect us. And when they don't uphold that, that is a problem. I know that as a white man, there are limitations to what I can say about this. So I want to use my platform in order to promote Black voices in this time. So with that in mind, I want to promote a few things. First off, this was posted to the NAACP Instagram. It's a list of reforms for fixing our broken police system. A ban on the use of knee holds and choke holds as an acceptable practice for police officers. The use of force continuum for any police department in the country must ensure that there are at least 6 levels of steps with clear rules on escalation. Each state's Open Records Act must ensure officer misconduct information and disciplinary histories are not shielded from the public. Recertification credentials may be denied for police officers if determined their use of deadly force was unwarranted by federal guidelines. And the implementation of citizens' review boards in municipalities to hold police departments accountable and build public confidence. We also need to support peaceful protests. While some protesters have turned violent, and I don't endorse that, many of them have stayed peaceful, and they've had their First Amendment rights violated unprovoked. You can see images and you can see videos of this all over the internet. A friend of mine, he lives in Richmond, and he's been participating in some of the demonstrations there that have stayed peaceful, and yet he's been tear gassed 3 times in the last few days. In Washington, D.C., the President of the United States called himself a friend to peaceful protesters. And then he proceeded to have his National Guard fire tear gas into a crowd of peaceful protesters so that he could go do a photo op at a church. Those are blatant violations of civil liberties, and those need to be protected. So with that in mind, I also have listed down below and linked down below several organizations that you can support. If you can show up to the peaceful protests and participate in them, then by all means do that. But if you can't, due to certain circumstances, you can support these organizations. The Black Lives Matter Foundation, Campaign Zero, the Black Visions Collective, the Minnesota Freedom Fund, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. By supporting these organizations, we can help to empower Black voices throughout our country. I know that many of you usually come to this channel to join a civil rights movement about autism. But civil rights movements cannot leave people behind. So if you are demanding equality for yourself, and you come to this channel in order to empower yourselves to do that, great. But we cannot leave people behind. And we cannot deny that same justice to other people.